The doors swing open at 9 minutes past 8, and the room stops breathing. Zaria Brooks stands in the entrance wearing the same ivory gown she wore the night she married him. Every head turns. Every glass freezes halfway to every mouth. Somewhere near the orchestra, a man's hand slides quietly beneath the table, fingers closing around something cold and metal, waiting for a signal that hasn't come yet. Nobody in this ballroom knows her real reason for coming tonight. They think they know. They think this is the night the ghost chairman finally lets her go, the night he stands beside the woman his family always wanted, the elegant one, the approved one, the one whose last name opens doors instead of raising eyebrows. That is the story they were told. That is the story they believed for months. They are wrong. And in about 90 seconds, most of them will understand exactly how wrong. Kang Min-Jae crosses the marble floor without a word. 600 people watch him walk toward the wife the tabloids buried weeks ago, and not one of them notices that security has already sealed the exits behind the velvet curtains. Not one of them notices the 2 extra staff members near the kitchen doors who are not actually staff. Before we proceed, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. I always like to picture where everyone is when a story like this starts. Zaria stops 3 feet from her husband, close enough to smell the same cologne she used to press her face into on ordinary Tuesday mornings, far enough that neither of them reaches for the other. Her hands are shaking, but she keeps them still at her sides, the way her father taught her to hold steady when a job got hard and quitting wasn't an option. She leans in, just enough for her voice to carry no farther than his ear. I hope she loves you more than I did. The room exhales all at once, a soft collective sound of pity, because everyone assumes they just watched a marriage end in 6 words. A few guests actually look away, embarrassed for her, the way people look away from something breaking in public. Min-Jae doesn't look away. He doesn't blink. For 8 years, the world has called him unreadable, a man with a face like a locked door, and tonight that door stays shut for exactly 2 more seconds. Then he answers her. I never asked for another woman. The words land wrong. Too calm. Too certain. A ripple moves through the crowd, uncertainty replacing pity. Because that is not what a man says when he's about to announce his engagement to someone else. Somewhere in the back, his aunt's smile starts to slip. Just barely, the corners of her mouth losing their grip like fabric coming loose from a pin. Min-Jae turns from his wife and faces the room. 600 people who came expecting champagne and a new bride find themselves staring at a man whose eyes have gone flat and still, the way water goes still right before something breaks the surface from underneath. Tonight, he says, I bury every traitor in this room. For 3 full seconds, nobody moves. Then the doors that were open all evening click shut, one after another, down every wall of the ballroom, and the sound is small and quiet, and somehow louder than a gunshot. Phones stop working. A waiter drops a tray near the east wall, and nobody even turns to look, because every eye in the building is now fixed on the 2 people standing in the center of the floor, and the man near the orchestra slowly, carefully, lets go of whatever he was reaching for, because he has just understood something the rest of the room hasn't caught up to yet. This was never an engagement party. To understand how 600 of the most powerful people on the West Coast walked willingly into a locked room, you have to go back 8 years to a night in Chicago when nobody in that ballroom existed yet, and Zaria Brooks was just a 26-year-old volunteer with blood on her hands that wasn't hers. She hears the gunshots before she sees anything. 3 of them, sharp and close, somewhere near the loading dock behind the free clinic, where she spends every Saturday changing bandages for people the hospitals down the street don't want to treat. She's locking up the supply closet when the back door slams open and a man half carries, half drags himself through it. One hand pressed to his shoulder, blood already soaking through a torn dress shirt that cost more than her rent. She doesn't ask who he is. She doesn't ask what happened. She grabs the first aid kit, locks the door behind him, and gets to work. Because that's what 6 years of Saturdays taught her to do first, and ask questions never. He doesn't speak much that night. He watches her hands the whole time, the way they move fast but never shake, the way she doesn't flinch at the amount of blood on the floor. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, half conscious, he tells her his name is Min, just Min. She has no reason to think it's a lie, and no reason to think it matters. At dawn, two men in dark suits knock on the clinic door and flash badges that look almost real. Federal agents, they say, looking for an armed and dangerous individual who may have come through this area injured. Zaria stands in the doorway in scrubs stained with a stranger's blood and tells them she hasn't seen anyone tonight. She's lying, and she knows it, and she doesn't care, because the man sleeping in the back room asked for nothing except help. And in her world, that's still worth protecting. The agents leave. The stranger stays 3 more days, healing quietly, watching her more than he watches the television. And then one morning he's simply gone. No note, no goodbye, just an envelope of cash on the counter that she refuses to touch because it feels like payment for something that was never supposed to be transactional. 4 months pass before she hears the knock again. This time he's not bleeding. This time he's wearing a suit that fits like it was built around his exact measurements that morning, which it was. He stands on her doorstep in a neighborhood he has clearly never walked through before, and when she opens the door, recognition takes a full 3 seconds to arrive. "I've spent 4 months," he says, "trying to understand why you chose a stranger over your own safety." She almost laughs because the question sounds absurd to her, like asking why water is wet. "You were bleeding on my floor," she says. "I wasn't going to hand you to men with fake badges because you looked expensive enough to be a problem." Something shifts behind his eyes when she says that, something she won't fully understand for years, and he asks if she'll let him take her to dinner, not as payment, not as an obligation, just dinner. 1 hour, and if she says no, he promises he won't come back a second time. She says no anyway. Not because she's afraid of him, though maybe she should be. Something about the stillness in him, the way he studies a room before he enters it, tells her this is not a man who spends his time volunteering at free clinics for fun. Money like his doesn't come from nowhere, and men like him don't show up on doorsteps in neighborhoods like hers without a reason bigger than gratitude. He doesn't push. He simply says, "Then I'll see you Saturday," and walks back to a car waiting at the curb with its engine already running. And that's how Zaria Brooks learns that the quiet ones are sometimes the most dangerous, because they don't ask twice. They just come back. She doesn't know yet that his real name isn't Min. She doesn't know he owns half a dozen companies whose names appear in business journals across 3 states. She doesn't know that federal investigators have opened and quietly closed 4 separate cases with his name attached to them, each one disappearing the same way a stone disappears into deep water, without a ripple anyone can trace back to the surface. All she knows, standing in her doorway watching his car pull away, is that something about tonight has already changed the direction of her life, and there's no way yet to know if that direction leads somewhere safe. If a story like that pulls you in the way it pulled me in when I first heard it, stay close, because this is only the beginning of what happened between Zaria Brooks and the man the world would eventually call the ghost chairman. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I'll love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going tonight. The argument starts over something small, a missed dinner, a canceled flight, and Min-Jae knows within the first 10 seconds that his wife is lying to him. Zaria stands at the kitchen island of their Seattle penthouse, arms crossed, voice sharp in a way it has never been sharp before. "I don't want to go to your cousin's wedding," she says. "I'm tired of smiling at people who talk about me like I'm not in the room." He watches her hands. They're gripping the edge of the counter too tightly, knuckles pale against dark granite. A woman who is truly angry doesn't hold on to something like she's afraid of falling. He says nothing about this yet. He simply nods, tells her he understands, and lets her walk out of the room, believing she's won. The moment the bedroom door clicks shut, his calm face disappears. He picks up his phone and calls the one man he trusts to find answers, without asking questions first. 3 weeks earlier, none of this existed. 3 weeks earlier, Zaria was laughing in this same kitchen, flour on her sleeves, teaching him how to fold a proper pancake instead of flipping it too early and splitting it in half. He remembers the sound of that laugh more clearly than he remembers most business deals worth 9 figures. That sound is missing now, and he intends to find out exactly why. He doesn't confront her. He watches. He notices she deletes messages the second she reads them. He notices she flinches when unfamiliar cars slow down outside their building. He notices she started taking a different route to her volunteer clinic downtown, one that adds 20 extra minutes and passes through 3 security cameras instead of none. A man who built an empire on reading rooms before speaking in them does not miss details like this. His investigator, a quiet former army officer named Desmond Ray, who has worked for the Kang family for 11 years without ever once appearing in a photograph, calls him back 2 days later with a folder that makes even Desmond's steady voice tighten. "She's being watched," Desmond says. "Someone's been photographing her father's job site in Atlanta, same with 2 of her old college friends. And sir, the messages she's deleting, they're not from another man. They're threats." Min-Jae doesn't respond right away. He stands at the window of his office on the 40th floor, looking down at a city that has feared his name for a decade without ever proving a single accusation against him. And for the first time in years, that fear feels useless to him. None of it can stop a bullet aimed at his wife's father. "Find out who's sending them," he says. "Don't tell her you're looking. Don't tell anyone." 6 days pass before Zaria mentions Rosalind Kang for the first time, not by accident, but because his aunt calls the penthouse directly and insists on a private lunch. Just the 2 of them, woman to woman. Zaria goes because refusing would look like weakness, and weakness is the one thing Rosalind Kang has hunted in her since the wedding day 8 years ago. They meet at a restaurant on the water in downtown Seattle. White tablecloths, a view of ferries crossing gray water, and Rosalind orders for both of them without asking what Zaria wants. "You've done well," Rosalind says, folding her hands. "Considering where you started." Zaria smiles the way she's learned to smile at every one of these lunches, polite, unreadable, giving nothing back. "I started in a home that taught me to work for what I have. I've never been embarrassed by that." "Of course not." Rosalind's eyes stay flat, pleasant, dangerous. "But empires aren't built on comfort, dear. They're built on strategy. And strategy sometimes asks people to step aside for the good of something bigger than themselves." The words land exactly the way they're meant to. A warning wrapped in dinner conversation. Zaria keeps her spine straight and her voice even, but under the table her hand finds the edge of her napkin and twists it until her knuckles go white. That night, another envelope arrives. No stamp, no return address, slipped beneath the door of their private elevator. Somehow, past a security system that costs more than most people's homes. Inside, a photograph of her father standing outside the elevator repair shop where he's worked for 30 years. Taken from across the street, time-stamped that same morning. Beneath it, 4 words written in careful block letters. He doesn't know yet. Zaria sits on the bathroom floor with the door locked, knees pulled to her chest, and doesn't cry. Crying would mean accepting this as real, and accepting it as real would mean telling Min-Jae, and telling Min-Jae would mean watching the man she married disappear into someone capable of burning down half the West Coast to protect her. She chooses the argument instead. The distance, the cold shoulder over breakfast. If everyone believes their marriage is already dying, maybe whoever is sending these photographs will believe it too, and maybe her father's shop stays standing. She doesn't know Min-Jae is 1 week ahead of her. She doesn't know Desmond Ray has already traced the paper stock of that envelope to a print shop used exclusively by a security firm on Rosalind Kang's payroll. She doesn't know that somewhere in a boardroom in Manhattan, a woman named Seo Hae-rin, poised, brilliant, and completely unaware she is being used as a weapon in a war she didn't start, has just accepted an invitation to a business gala hosted by the Kang family. An invitation Rosalind arranged personally, an invitation designed to be photographed. The tabloids run the first picture 4 days later. Min-Jae and Hae-rin, standing close at a charity dinner, her hand briefly on his arm as she laughs at something he said. The headline writes itself before noon. Is the ghost chairman's marriage over? Zaria sees the photograph on her phone while sitting in her car outside the clinic, engine still running. She stares at it for a long time. Then, slowly, deliberately, she does something that surprises even her. She likes the post. Because if the world believes this, the people watching her father might finally stop. Inside the penthouse that night, Min-Jae watches her scroll past the same headline without reacting, without asking a single question about the woman in the photograph, and something in his chest goes cold, in a way 3 bullets in Chicago never managed. His wife isn't jealous. His wife isn't hurt. His wife is relieved. That single detail tells him more than every report Desmond has handed him combined. She isn't falling out of love with him. She's protecting him from something, and she's willing to let the entire country believe their marriage is over to do it. He sets his phone face down on the counter and looks at her, really looks at her the way he hasn't allowed himself to in weeks, searching for the crack beneath the performance. And for one unguarded second before she catches herself, he sees it. Fear. Old, exhausted fear. The kind that doesn't come from a stranger's photograph in the tabloids. The kind that comes from someone she loves being in danger. Zaria, he says quietly. She looks up, and for half a heartbeat, her guard drops completely. Then the elevator chimes. A courier, requiring a signature, standing in the hallway with a package neither of them ordered. Zaria's face goes pale before the door even opens. The courier hands Zaria a slim black box, no card, no name, and waits with a clipboard like this as any ordinary Tuesday delivery. Min-Jae signs for it himself. The moment the elevator doors close and the courier is gone, he sets the box on the counter and looks at his wife. Open it, he says, and this time his voice carries none of the softness from moments ago. This is the voice his enemies know. Flat, waiting. Zaria's hands shake as she lifts the lid. Inside sits a single burner phone, already powered on, one unread message glowing on the screen. She doesn't want to open it. She opens it anyway, because not knowing has always terrified her more than knowing. 3 days. Leave him, or your father learns what happens to people who get in the way. The room tilts. Min-Jae reads it over her shoulder in complete silence. And for the first time in 8 years of marriage, Zaria watches something in her husband's face she has never seen before. Not anger, not the cold control he wears like armor in every boardroom, but something closer to grief. He finally understands. Every argument, every missed dinner, every cold shoulder for the last 6 weeks wasn't about him. It was never about him. How long? He asks. Have you been carrying this alone? She can't answer. Her throat closes around the words, and instead of speaking, she finally lets herself cry, right there against the kitchen island where she once taught him to make pancakes, tears she's been swallowing since the first photograph of her father's shop arrived weeks ago. He pulls her against him, and for a long moment, neither of them says anything at all. Outside their windows, Seattle glitters, indifferent, unaware that somewhere inside this penthouse, a decision is being made that will end with several very powerful people losing everything they've built. I need you to trust me, he finally says. Completely. No more hiding. I was trying to protect you, she whispers. If I told you, you'd burn the whole city down looking for whoever sent this. I already know who sent it. His voice is quiet, almost gentle, which somehow makes it more frightening than shouting ever could. I've known for 4 days. I was waiting for you to trust me enough to say it out loud. Zaria pulls back, stunned. You knew? Desmond traced the paper stock on the first envelope. It came from a print shop that does contract work for exactly one security firm in this city. He pauses, letting the weight of the next sentence settle before he says it. That firm answers to my aunt. The words land like a second betrayal, deeper than the first, because family was supposed to be the one place danger couldn't reach. Zaria sits down slowly at the counter, replaying every lunch, every backhanded compliment, every moment Rosalind Kang smiled at her across a white tablecloth while quietly planning to erase her. She's not acting alone, Min-Jae continues. There's someone inside my own organization helping her move money without it showing up anywhere official. I've suspected for months. I just didn't have proof strong enough to move on. That proof arrives 2 days later, and it arrives in a way neither of them expects. Zaria is leaving a downtown meeting with an event planner, a meeting that, unknown to her, was arranged specifically by Min-Jae's team as bait when she spots a familiar face near the parking structure. Grant Kessler, Min-Jae's longtime chief financial advisor, a man who has attended every holiday dinner and every hospital visit for 8 straight years, standing beside a car that doesn't belong to the company fleet, accepting a briefcase from a man she's never seen before. She freezes behind a concrete pillar, phone already lifting instinctively to record. Grant notices her. He doesn't panic. He doesn't run. He simply looks directly at her, closes the briefcase, and offers a calm, controlled smile that chills her more than any threat written in block letters ever could. "Mrs. Kang," he says, voice level, almost friendly. "You really shouldn't be down here alone." It isn't a threat exactly. It's worse. It's a statement of fact from a man who has clearly done this before and clearly doesn't expect consequences. She doesn't respond. She turns and walks fast toward her car, heart slamming against her ribs, and doesn't stop shaking until she's 3 blocks away, with the doors locked and Min-Jae's number already ringing through the speaker. He listens to every word without interrupting once. When she finishes, there's a long silence on the line, long enough that she checks to see if the call dropped. "Say nothing to anyone," he finally says. "Come home. Don't stop anywhere. I'm sending a car." That night, after Zaria is finally asleep, exhausted from adrenaline she's been running on for hours, Min-Jae sits alone in his office with Desmond Ray standing across the desk, laying out a folder thick enough to require 2 hands to hold. Wire transfers routed through 4 shell companies. Meeting logs between Rosalind and 3 separate rival syndicates. A voice memo recorded 11 days ago at a private dinner where Rosalind Kang can be heard saying the sentence that will end her place in this family forever. "If you can't kill the king, destroy his heart. Once she's gone, replacing her with someone suitable becomes simple." Min-Jae listens to it twice. Then he closes the folder, leans back in his chair, and for the first time since this began, he smiles, not the calm, unreadable smile the world knows him for, but something colder, something final. "Send the invitations," he says quietly. Desmond blinks. "For the banquet? Tell my aunt it's an engagement celebration." Min-Jae's eyes don't move from the window, from the city lights spread out below like a field of small, unaware witnesses. "Tell her I've finally made my decision about Co. Hae-rin. Make sure everyone believes it. Every investor, every executive who's been quietly moving money against me, every person in that folder. And your wife?" For the first time all night, something almost gentle crosses his face. She already knows the ending. She just doesn't know I'm the one closing it. 3 days later, invitations go out across 5 states. Gold lettering on heavy cream cardstock, each one promising an announcement no one in this story actually intends to make. Every enemy, Rosalind Kang, has quietly gathered accepts without hesitation, certain they're arriving to celebrate a victory 8 years in the making. None of them know they're walking into a room with every exit already accounted for. None of them know Zaria Brooks is about to put on the same ivory gown from her wedding night and walk back into that ballroom one final time, not as a woman losing her husband, but as the last piece of a trap 8 years in the making. The gold envelope arrives at Rosalind Kang's estate on a Tuesday morning, and by noon she's already called 4 people to gloat about it. "He's finally seeing sense," she tells her attorney over the phone, standing in her marble foyer in Bellevue, Washington, admiring her reflection in a mirror that cost more than most people's cars. An engagement banquet. My nephew is announcing Hayrin as his future wife. 8 years of embarrassment, finally corrected. She has no idea the invitation in her hand is bait, and she takes it anyway, hook buried so deep she doesn't feel it until it's far too late to matter. Across the city, in a downtown law office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, Grant Kessler reads his own invitation twice, searching for a trap he can't quite name. Something about the timing bothers him. Something about the fact that Min-Jae hasn't spoken to him directly in 9 days. Not since the parking garage, not since Zaria's eyes met his over a briefcase he shouldn't have been holding. He calls Rosalind anyway. She tells him he's being paranoid. She tells him the marriage is finished, the wife is broken, and in 6 days they'll finally have everything they spent 2 years building toward. Neither of them notices Desmond Ray's team quietly rerouting every phone line connected to the Kang family security network, logging every call, every text, every wire transfer moving through accounts that were never supposed to be traceable. Zaria spends those 6 days rehearsing a version of herself she hasn't worn in years. She stands in front of the same mirror where she got dressed for her wedding, running her palm down the ivory silk of the gown Min-Jae had preserved without telling her, and for a moment her hands shake so badly she has to sit down on the edge of the bed. "You don't have to do this," Min-Jae says from the doorway, voice low, watching her fight to steady her breathing. "Desmond can handle tonight without you standing in that room." "No." She looks up at him, and something in her face has hardened since the parking garage, since the phone in the black box, since she finally understood exactly how far his aunt was willing to go. "They spent months trying to erase me quietly. I want to be the last thing they see before it falls apart." He crosses the room and takes her hands, still trembling, and presses them flat against his chest, over the steady beat underneath. Then we walk in together. But Zaria, once those doors close, there's no version of tonight where I let any of them walk free. Not my aunt, not Grant, not one investor who moved money against this family. You understand what that means? She nods slowly. I understand. What she doesn't say, what she barely admits to herself, is that some small, quiet part of her has been waiting 8 years for a night like this one. The night the people who called her the charity wife, the American experiment, finally understand exactly who they underestimated. The banquet hall in downtown Seattle fills fast that Friday evening. Valets in white gloves park cars worth more than most annual salaries. Camera crews from 3 business networks wait outside, hoping for a single photo of the bride-to-be. Inside, string lights hang across the ceiling like frozen rain, and 600 guests move through the room trading rumors dressed up as small talk. Grant Kessler arrives at 7:40, scanning the room out of habit, counting exits the way he's counted them at a dozen events like this one. Everything looks ordinary. That's what worries him most. Rosalind arrives at 8, dressed in deep red, moving through the crowd like a woman collecting a debt she's been owed for 8 years. She stops beside Grant near the bar and lowers her voice. "Where is she?" "Nobody's seen her," Grant says. "Word is she's not coming." Rosalind smiles, the kind of smile that has fooled a family for decades. "Good. Then tonight goes exactly as planned." At 8:09, the doors at the far end of the ballroom open, and the room goes still. Not Hayrin. Zaria Brooks stands in the entrance in the same ivory gown from her wedding night, and for 3 full seconds, nobody in that room breathes. Rosalind's smile begins to fracture, 1 degree at a time, as Min-Jae crosses the marble floor toward the wife everyone believed he had already left behind. Grant's hand tightens around his glass. Somewhere near the orchestra, a hired security contractor, a man Rosalind personally placed inside the venue for reasons nobody questioned, quietly reaches beneath a linen-covered table. Zaria stops 3 feet from her husband, close enough to remember every ordinary morning they've shared, far enough that neither of them reaches for the other. Not yet. She leans in and whispers the sentence she's practiced in her head for 6 days straight. "I hope she loves you more than I did." The room exhales, certain they've just witnessed the end of a marriage. Rosalind's shoulders finally relax. Grant sets down his glass, already reaching for his phone to send the message his investors have been waiting for. Min-Jae doesn't move for 2 full seconds. Then he answers, loud enough for the front 3 rows to hear clearly. I never asked for another woman. The words hang in the air like something breaking apart in slow motion. Rosalind's confident expression begins to slip. Grant's phone stays frozen in his hand. Message unsent. Min-Jae turns from his wife to face the room. 600 guests who came expecting a celebration, finding themselves suddenly, unexplainably, uneasy. Tonight, he says, voice calm and absolutely certain, I bury every traitor in this room. For 1 full second, silence swallows the ballroom whole. Then every door along the far wall clicks shut, one after another. The sounds small and final. Phones lose signal at the exact same moment across the entire building. A tray crashes somewhere near the kitchen entrance, and nobody even turns to look, because every single guest is now staring at the man in the center of the floor, and the security contractor near the orchestra slowly, carefully, lets go of what he was reaching for because he has just understood, along with everyone else in that room, that he walked willingly into a trap built for exactly this moment. Rosalind's face drains of color. Min-Jae, what is this? Save it? His voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. I have 11 months of financial records connecting you to 3 rival syndicates. I have a voice recording from a dinner you thought was private. I have wire transfers with your signature on them, routed through 4 companies you thought I'd never find. Grant Kessler moves toward the side exit fast, shoulders low, and finds Desmond Ray already standing there, arms crossed, blocking the only path out that Grant hasn't accounted for. Sit down, Grant, Desmond says quietly. Federal agents are already in the building. Might as well finish your drink. Across the room, Zaria watches 8 years of quiet cruelty finally collapse in real time, watches Rosalind Kang, the woman who called her the charity wife at every family dinner for nearly a decade, standing frozen in the center of 600 witnesses, with absolutely nowhere left to go. Federal agents move through the ballroom in dark jackets, quiet and fast, and within 11 minutes, 6 people who arrived expecting champagne are leaving in handcuffs instead. Rosalind Kang doesn't scream. She doesn't beg. She simply stares at her nephew as 2 agents guide her toward the side entrance. And for the first time in 8 years, Min-Jae watches something close to fear cross his aunt's face. You would choose her, Rosalind says, voice low enough that only he can hear it, over your own blood. You stopped being my blood, Min-Jae answers. The night you decided to erase my wife instead of accepting her. Grant Kessler doesn't resist when agents ask him to place both hands on the table. He spent 11 years managing the Kang family's finances, and in less than a week, Desmond Ray's team traced every hidden account back to his signature, every payment, every phone call to men who wanted Min-Jae's empire broken from the inside out. He knew this ending was coming from the moment he saw Zaria's face in that parking garage. He just didn't know how fast. Across the ballroom, 3 investors who quietly funneled money toward Rosalind's plan sit stunned in their chairs, watching security escort them out one at a time, while the remaining guests, the ones with nothing to hide, stand frozen near the walls, phones useless, unable to look away. Zaria stays close to Min-Jae through all of it, her hand finding his without either of them planning it, and for the first time in 6 weeks, she doesn't have to fake a single thing she's feeling. By midnight, the ballroom sits empty, except for cleanup crews and the soft hum of city traffic outside. Zaria sinks into a chair near the window, exhausted in a way that reaches all the way down to her bones, and Min-Jae kneels in front of her, taking both her hands in his. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asks. And it isn't really a question anymore, just something he needs to say out loud. She looks at him for a long moment before answering. I trusted you completely. I didn't trust what grief would turn you into if something happened to my father because of me. He closes his eyes, And for the second time in his life, the ghost chairman lets himself cry in front of another person. Not from fear, not from loss, from understanding finally the size of what she carried alone to protect him. I would have burned every one of them down the moment I found that first photograph, he admits quietly. I know, she says. That's exactly why I couldn't tell you. 3 months pass before the country stops talking about the collapse of the Kang family's inner circle. Financial journalists in New York spend weeks untangling the wire transfers. A federal courthouse in Seattle becomes the center of a case that quietly takes down two rival syndicates without a single shot fired, exactly the way Min-Jae planned it from the beginning. Rosalind Kang loses everything, her assets frozen, her name stripped from every board she once controlled, her reputation reduced to a headline. Nobody in her old circle wants attached to their own name anymore. Grant Kessler accepts a plea deal that keeps him out of the worst of it, in exchange for testimony that finally, permanently, ends the syndicate's reach into Min-Jae's companies. Seo Hae-rin, cleared publicly of any wrongdoing, sends Zaria a short, honest letter a few weeks later, apologizing for a role she never fully understood she was playing. Zaria writes back and tells her there's nothing to forgive. Neither of them chose this. Only one woman did, and she's already lost everything she built her life around. On a quiet Sunday morning in early spring, Zaria's father flies out from Atlanta to visit for the first time since the wedding. He stands in the kitchen of the Seattle penthouse, watching his daughter teach her husband how to properly flip a pancake without splitting it down the middle, laughing at how badly Min-Jae still manages to mess it up after 8 years of practice. You did good, Zar, her father tells her quietly, while Min-Jae is distracted scraping a ruined pancake into the trash. Real good. She smiles, watching her husband curse softly under his breath at a piece of breakfast that refuses to cooperate, and thinks about how far they've come from a bleeding stranger on a clinic floor in Chicago. Business magazines still call him America's most mysterious billionaire. Reporters still speculate about the empire nobody can quite prove exists. But among the small circle of people who know the real story, who know what Zaria Brooks sacrificed to protect a man the world only ever saw as untouchable, one truth has become impossible to argue with. Power built the Kang Empire. Money protected it for decades. But it took one woman's willingness to break her own heart in silence to finally make it safe. And somewhere inside that family, whispered quietly at holidays and anniversaries for years to come, one sentence outlives every threat that was ever written on an anonymous piece of paper. I hope she loves you more than I did. It was never a goodbye. It was the moment two people finally understood exactly how deep their love had always run. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me while telling it, that means everything. Real love isn't loud sometimes. It's a woman choosing silence to protect the people she cares about, and a man finally seeing her for who she really is. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. There are so many more waiting for you. Drop a comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest tonight. And if this story gave you even a little hope, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next story.